We're talking today with Jason Hall of Holland, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, start us off with a little bit of background on yourself. To start with, where and when were you born? Where'd you grow up?
I was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan, in 1980. I was raised in Ionia, Michigan. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but yeah.
Well, it's a place people can look at.
Okay. I couldn't wait to get out, so.
Yeah. All right, and what did your family do for a living when you were growing up?
We were pretty poor. I mean, my parents didn't, neither one of them went to college, and they just had your basic jobs. They moved from job to job to job, and not for a long time. So I mean, retail, a lot, I guess, was probably what they both did.
Okay. All right. How many kids were in the family?
It was me, and then I have a younger brother and younger sister.
Okay. All right. And so, so when did you graduate from high school?
1998.
Okay. And what did you do upon graduation?
I immediately joined the military.
Okay.
I actually had joined before I'd signed up.
Okay. So what motivated that decision?
I have, I guess, family history. I have an aunt and uncle who were both in the Army. My grandfather was in the Navy, so I don't know if it's really a family tradition, but it was a way that I guess my family saw for us to maybe break out of our cycle of being stuck in Ionia, and yeah. So I mean, at that time 1998 was a little bit different. There was no pre 2001 September 11th, and so I mean, I was as patriotic as anybody else, and I watched all the war movies and was always interested in U.S. history. But I mean, there was no driving force I had to serve my country. But it was more I saw as an opportunity to be able to grow as a person, and then with the added benefit of being able to serve my country.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so at that point, it's kind of a personal and kind of career or life course,
right?
Choice, that kind of thing. Yeah. Because at that point, there wasn't really any great prospect of anything big blowing up in their faces either.
Right.
Okay. And then when you enlisted, did you pick your occupational specialty or what you wanted to train in, or were you just going to find out when you got there?
No, well, we went and did the ASVAB test or whatever. I think I did it in Kalamazoo.
Okay.
I think it was in Kalamazoo. And then so based on your scores, then you get to pick, from a list of jobs. I knew I didn't want to do, infantry or anything like that, and I figured Signal Corps had a lot of things that I thought looked interesting at least. And I thought that it would relate to life after the military. So I mean, that was kind of why I picked. It was random as to the job I got, but yeah, I mean, I knew Signal Corps and I circled, this is what I'm going to do for my MOS, but I really didn't know at the time what it entailed. But
Okay, and where did you go for basic training?
I went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
Okay. And what was that like?
It was interesting. Again, there's tons of war movies and stuff like that. I knew people who were in the military. I had family that was in the military, and so I knew a little bit of what to expect. I didn't really find it that difficult. Basic training. I had pretty much been on my own since I was 15. And so, being motivated, or I've always been a self-starter. So I wake up early. Never really was a big deal. Running wasn't, a big deal. Push-ups weren't. I was in much better shape than I am now, of course. But
well, what about the discipline part? If you were on your own, there's not anyone telling you what to do.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I've had jobs since I was 10 years old. So I mean, it was. It's different. I never had an issue taking orders or following orders or anything like that. There's the interesting stuff, where the drill sergeants whip trash cans down the hall at 2:30 in the morning and things like that, that are a little bit of a shock to your system. But I don't know. I guess it just is part of the deal. You just, like I said, you just kind of accept it. But
do you think that they basically treated people fairly, at least within their system?
Oh, for sure. I mean, this is again in 1998, so it's not Full Metal Jacket where they're beating recruits and stuff like that. But yeah, I never felt like it was people were targeted for anything in particular. Yeah, no,
Right.
that was pretty fair.
Okay. Now, were there other people who were training alongside you who had more trouble adjusting?
Oh, for sure. I mean, you had people. We'd be in formation and it's raining and you're doing push-ups and it's 4 o'clock in the morning and people are just bawling their eyes out, crying because they just can't handle it. We had a couple people try and get into physical altercations with the drill sergeants because they just when the drill sergeant's in your face just screaming at you, they couldn't handle that, and so. There's a couple people. There's always a rumor, and I find it is pretty much universal that somebody always tried to kill themselves in the barracks during basic training. I never saw that, but again, there was always rumors and stuff like that. I don't think it ever got to that point, but yeah, I mean, people have a hard time adjusting to that style of life. I mean, it is a culture shock.
So, how long did basic last?
That one was only 8 weeks. Yeah, two months. So.
Okay, all right. And ultimately, what are they teaching you in those 8 weeks?
I mean, just the real basics. So, when you first get to basic training, it's like an orientation phase where you learn to stand in formation, you learn to march in formation, you learn, you get issued your uniforms and all your gear and stuff like that. You have a 1 mile run that you have to complete, and if you can't complete that, you can't move to the next phase.
Do you get weapons training at all at that point?
You do not. Not until you get, I guess, to basic training. So yeah, and then I guess once you get through that and then you get to your unit, it's really the whole break you down, build you up as a team kind of thing. But yeah, and you get weapons training. It's really just the M16 was all we had trained on. When you go to your unit and stuff, we 249s and other things. Okay. But yeah.
Now, was your training group really segregated by sex, or did you have men and women training together?
It was men and women. It was all integrated. I mean, our barracks were separated, of course, but training itself was all integrated with male and female. And
then after you complete basic training, what do you do next?
Then I went to Fort Gordon, Georgia for for AIT, Advanced Individual Training. I was a 31 Romeo. I don't think it exists anymore, but it was a multi-channel manual transmission systems operator maintainer. So kind of going back to when I circled it on the thing, I don't know what that meant at the time.
Like fixing radios?
Yeah. Essentially, it's just line of sight radio communication. You got one antenna here, and you put in a shot, and then that kind of builds the network background that then everyone communicates off of. So. Okay.
So during that time in AIT, how did you spend your time? What were you doing?
That was so. I mean, you in the morning, you get up and you do PT still, and then you get an hour to eat and shower, and then you go to class all day essentially, and then that was where you learned the meat and potatoes of your job, where they showed us the actual equipment and broke down theory and the different ways that the networks were built and stuff like that. So it was mostly class, and then you would march home from class or march back to the barracks from class, and then you would essentially be released for the day. I mean, you had restrictions, of course. You had to stay on post, and but you're pretty free to go get a haircut or PX or.
Okay, and you at some point get to actually work with the equipment, right?
Yeah. Well, no. During AIT, none of the equipment that I touched when I was actually in, never saw that equipment in AIT at all. The stuff that we used was Vietnam era equipment, and I mean, not that the stuff that I wound up actually using was much more advanced, but I never saw that equipment that I saw in AIT ever again.
Okay, so the AIT equipment, I mean, that was not computerized, that was just radios?
No, it was radios, but it was, I don't remember all the details exactly, but there was these devices that you had to plug into boards, and they had to be oriented a certain way, and it was really, really outdated and weird.
Okay. And how long did AIT last?
AIT was 2 months also.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so now, when is it that you complete? Around what date did you finish AIT?
In December, I think, of '98.
Okay. That'd be about right, because if you
Yeah.
enlisted
Yeah.
after you start after you finish high school. That
Right.
worked about right. Okay.
I was just trying to, because then my next duty station, I think I got there right after Christmas. So.
Okay. And so what was your first duty station?
I was in Camp Casey in Korea. I was in 122 Signal Battalion for 2nd Infantry Division. I don't think Camp Casey is there anymore either.
May not be.
I've heard, yeah. So.
Okay. All right. So you go there. So how do they get you out there?
How do I get to Korea?
Yeah.
So I went from, so I was in Georgia. I went home to Michigan for leave after AIT before, and then I flew to Seattle, and then to LA, and then to Korea from there. So, it was a very long day, but it was all commercial flights. Like I flew into, there's regular airports and stuff like that.
Okay.
So.
All right. And now, once you land in Korea, now what happens?
So you meet like an orientation leader or whatever, and they take you on a bus. And we went to Camp Casey. It was in Tongdeshan, South Korea.
Okay.
I don't know. And then you have another orientation there. You go through. You get issued all your TA-50, all your gear, and then they took you to a unit. Which was, we had the orientation building was right here, and then there was a road, and then our unit was literally right there. So we walked from one building to another, and then you get assigned to a room. And my entire unit was in the field when I got there, so nobody was in the barracks at all. It was literally just me and like 3 other people in the barracks until they came out of the field. I think 3 days later. But yeah.
Okay. So once you meet these people, you find out what you're supposed to do. What was your job now?
So I was they called it the V3, Victor 3. It was literally just like I said, the line of sight communication. So I was just at that point just a team member on a Victor 3 line of sight. So initially a lot of it was just learning the equipment, because like I said, from AIT I'd never seen this equipment at all, and so it was really just learning it, and then learning what life, I guess, in the military was actually like, adapting to that routine, and.
Okay. And so what aspects of that life kind of stand out in your memory?
Once you go through basic and AIT, you're pretty used to the whole, I think the biggest culture shock for most people in the military is the waking up, at like 5 o'clock in the morning to go run X amount of miles in the rain or the snow or whatever else. So I think that was, once you just, I guess, accept or you realize that that's your life now, it becomes much easier to do. It's just part of your day. It's part of any routine. I really, the bases that they build they're like little pieces of America in all these different countries. So they have Burger King, the culture shock that you experience. Once you leave the gate and actually go into the community, of course, there's a 17, 18-year-old kid, visiting Korea on your own for the first time. It can be quite shocking, but
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So how, today, now we've made it to 2024, South Korea is in a lot of ways a very modern, highly developed country and so forth. Whereas in the 1950s, it absolutely was not.
Oh, yeah.
So what did you see when you left the base and so forth? What did you see of Korea? What did it look like to you?
It's very crowded. Everybody's trying to sell you something when you're on the streets. I know it was very popular. People could get, you take like a picture of a suit and they would like hand tailor a suit, and it was like $60 or something like that. So people would do that. It was just, I don't know, it's very different from, American culture, but at the same time they had, electronics and everything else. So it's not like they were a backwoods country, they're developed as well. I found all the people were really nice and inviting. They were excited to talk to you, and I love Korea.
All right. And then what's a regular day like when you're on the base?
If you're not in the field, you get up, you do PT, you go back, you eat, you shower, you have like a 9 o'clock formation, and then you break into so that's a whole company formation, and then you break into your individual platoons, and then the platoons would have their meeting, and then you break into sections, and then the section would have a meeting, and then you break into teams, and then as a team, a lot you would just maintain your equipment essentially. So you a lot of cleaning and changing parts or fixing things. But just day-to-day stuff. I mean, things that pop up during the day. When you're in the field, it's a little different. But.
So how much time did you spend in the field?
Of the year I was in Korea, probably 9 months. So it was a lot of field training. Yeah.
All right. So what did the field training consist of?
Really, you just in Korea it's really mountainous, and being a line of sight, that's the best place to put our antennas up. So we would drive up these crazy, turny mountain roads and these giant Humvees with huge trailers, and you just get to the top of the mountain essentially, and you would just set up your antennas, and then it can take quite a while sometimes to work out the bugs and make sure that the shot's in tight. But really, once the shot was in, it was just sitting there. Mm-hmm. We played a lot of cards.
How much tension was there between North and South at that point?
I mean, they would always do stuff. I think while I was there, they called it the crab boat incident or something. I think North Korea had blown up a South Korean fishing vessel or something like that, and tensions got a little tight. But really, that was about it. When I was there, other than that, it was really. We went to the DMZ like as a whole. Our whole unit went, and we had to go in Class A's, and but we got to tour the DMZ. And
did you go to Panmunjom, the place where they signed the armistice?
Yeah, we were actually in the room. Yeah, with the line that's drawn down the middle of and one part's North Korea, one part's South Korea. Yeah, it's quite interesting.
Okay, and Adam, did they warn you at all about things you should not be doing?
Oh, for sure. They were stay in the group, don't act unprofessional. Essentially, you were there and you were representing the United States military, and but there was no don't walk out here because they were scared of getting shot or anything. There's no tensions like that, but they were just like, you're a representative of your country, so act accordingly.
Okay, so because of the nature of your job, when you're out in the field, now you're setting up close to the DMZ, because would that normally be the case? Because
we were really all over the place, okay. all over the peninsula. I think probably the closest we got for field exercise maybe was like within 10 miles of the DMZ, but we never really did. Our training exercises were more around Seoul and things like that. So.
All right. And I mean, did you go into Seoul or the cities much?
Oh, I mean, when I could. Like I said, of the year, I only got about 3 months. It was kind of hard. You had to get passes, like extended passes, because you had to be in the gate by a certain time, and so to stay out past that time, you had to have a pass, which were kind of hard to come by. But yeah, I had a couple, our friend group, and we toured Seoul and went to the clubs and bars, and it was it's amazing. I don't know if I want to say what they called it, but there's a giant hill in like downtown Seoul that's just lined with all these clubs, and they call it a very maybe not politically correct name, the hill there. So, but it was a very private part. I don't know. That's where I knew most people would go. Mm-hmm. That's where the central of all of the things we were interested in were.
All right. Now in earlier times and so forth, you have a lot of cases where American soldiers would have Korean girlfriends or this kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Or there were prostitutes and that kind of stuff. And so all of that stuff was out there at this time.
Yeah, we had, they actually warned us about them in the orientation when we got there. They called them drinky girls or juicy girls. Yeah, where you would buy them a shot or something like that. It was usually fruit juice and some astronomical amount. But yeah, definitely, there was many people. I had friends who fell desperately and madly in love with people. But yeah, there was a lot of illness and disease that they warned us about or tried to scare us about, and Korean hemorrhagic fever and all of this other crazy things. But yeah, I don't know. People got in trouble, but for the most part, I think, people behave themselves.
Okay. So there weren't really major discipline issues or things like that?
No, yeah, just, people overindulging.
All right. And so how long were you in Korea?
Just a year.
Okay. And then after the Korean tour completes, what do you do next?
Then I went to Fort Hood, Texas, and I was there for a couple of years. Well, until I went to Germany in 2003. So, but yeah.
Oh, okay. So and then what unit did you join Fort Hood?
I was in 1st Cavalry Division, 16th Signal Battalion. They were part of 3 Corps, I think.
Okay. All right. And are you still working with the same equipment and
Yeah,
doing the same kind of
same
thing?
equipment, same job, same everything. About a year into my tour there, I became an NCO, and then I got a job as the training NCO for my company. But I only did that for about 6 months, and then went right back to the field again. So.
Okay. Now, when you got both, were you a Spec 4 at that point, or?
I was PFC when I got to Fort Hood, and then yeah.
Okay. Now, let's see. So Fort Hood is kind of flat, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Okay. So communication would have been a little bit easier.
Yes, much easier. Yeah, they have one. I forget what the name of the. I don't know, they call it a mountain. I don't know if it's a mountain or a big hill, but it's on there. We would set up a lot on. It was kind of on the outskirts of Fort Hood, just because it was the only spot around that was elevated. But yeah, no, much easier to set up shots in the States than it was in Korea.
All right. Now, the kind of job that you had, was it basically just kind of a regular 8-hour workday, or
Yeah,
or do you have shifts at different times of day so that there's always somebody?
Oh no, it was. I mean, you had things like in the barracks, you'd have like fire guard, where there was always somebody in the barracks 24 hours a day. But the unit itself was pretty much. I mean, you go to PT at 6:30, and then your final formation was sometime around 5 o'clock, and then once that was over, then you were released for the day. But yeah, it was just a work day.
All right. Now, and as you join these different units, how do the guys who are already there treat the new people?
I mean, you're always the FNG wherever you go. But I mean, really, I don't know. I did not have any issues integrating into any of the units that I went to. Everybody was always really open and welcome. I mean, I don't know, everybody's going through the same thing, so why make it harder? But maybe there was pranks and.
Well, and that was it different joining the unit in Fort Hood as opposed to the one Korea? Because when you come to Fort Hood, you have a year behind you already. You've been doing this already.
Right.
So did that feel different?
For sure, because now that had been my job, so I had been doing it, and so I mean, whether you're doing it in Korea or Texas, it's the same basic job. You do the same basic things. Mm-hmm. So the transition was a lot easier, a lot less shocking. At that point, you feel a little more comfortable with yourself as a soldier, I guess. So.
All right. And what was life in Texas like?
Hot. I just remember that as the most. Again, a lot more free than Korea because, once you're done with work, you can go wherever. And so we got to explore Texas a little bit, although it's gigantic. So, really just hot. Our motor pool was like a gigantic cement block in the middle of Texas heat. And so we would hide under trucks to try and get away from the sun. And, but yeah, I don't know. That was the first time as an adult that I had been in the world, besides being in Korea. I was 18 when I got to Korea, and so it was just a little different, but a lot more freedom, stateside.
Did you have a car at that point?
I bought one while I was there at a predatory APR, I would call it, but I mean, that's one thing. So Fort Hood is right here, and then outside is just concentric rings of car dealerships and pawn shops and check cashing stores. So there's a weird economy that springs up around military bases. So.
All right, and I don't know, what's the nearest city?
Killeen, Texas.
So it's not a really huge city.
No, biggest one that was close was Austin, I guess, was probably about 45 minutes away. A lot of people went down there on weekends and stuff like that. But yeah, Killeen itself existed only to serve the people from Fort Hood. If Fort Hood left, that town would just dry up. So. All
right, and so you did a stint as a trainer.
Yeah.
Did you like doing that, or did you want to get out of it?
I did not. I wanted to get out of it almost immediately. I mean, again, I see the value of it, but I don't know. I liked, certainly at that point, being in the middle of everything, and I felt really detached. And there was just lots of binders and check the box that you had to go through, and yeah, I was not a fan of it. But it did give me an opportunity to work more closely with the company commander and the first sergeant at the time, so I kind of got to see a little bit behind the scenes of how units actually operate. I mean, as a PFC, you don't understand any. You do what you're told, and you go where you go, and that's it. So it was it kind of gave me a different perspective, I guess, that I think helped when I moved back to field units, because I understood a little bit of the minutia that went on behind the scenes. So.
Were you at Fort Hood when 9/11 happened?
I was.
So tell me about that.
I remember that morning getting up, and my daughter had just been born on August 5th of that year. So my wife, at the time, she was home with the baby, and I was home, and we went to PT, we did our thing, came home, I got dressed, took a shower, and then as I was leaving, my wife was like, "Hey, something's going on in New York." And I remember seeing it, and I looked real quick, and I was like, it's nothing. And drove to the base, and people were talking about it, but the towers hadn't collapsed by that point. It was just the first plane had hit. So everybody was just kind of, we didn't know if it was an accident, we didn't know what was happening at that time. So nobody was really freaking out. But once that second one hit, then it kind of changed everything. It was a lot more formations. Everybody got recalled really quickly. So everybody who was on leave, things like that, everybody got called back to the post, and we got locked down for, I think it was 3 days. It felt like 100, but I think it was 3 days. We weren't allowed to leave our actual company area, other than to go to like the dining facility or the barracks. Like I lived off post, so I had to shower in my, in people's barracks rooms and stuff like that. But it was just it was chaos. Nobody knew what was going on. Nobody knew what this meant. So, you felt it. You felt the world change, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. So for reference here, when did you get married?
Oh, I'm sorry. In 2000 in Texas, I had met her. We were together in Korea. I had met her when I was in Korea, and then when we got to Texas, we got married.
Okay, so she was in the military.
She was in the military as well. Also, yeah, she was same MOS. Yeah, yep.
Okay, and then at that point, and then did she leave the service or go on leave to have the baby or what?
Yeah, she was on leave. Yeah, she actually got recalled to her unit as well, which was right next door to mine. But then was immediately put back on leave because obviously she had to take care of the baby.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you see, you have this initial kind of you're locked down, and then you're not really sure what's going to happen. Now, do you then start training for potentially going to a desert, or?
We did not. So I'm trying to think. So I think immediately after they lifted the lockdown and people were allowed to go home, it was maybe a week or a week and a half, and then we went to the field. We got deployed to the field, but it was already a regularly scheduled field exercise, so our day-to-day lives really didn't change, except now everything was locked down. So like, whereas before you could just drive in and out of the base at any point, now there was, stringent and rigorous inspections every time you came to the post. But that was probably the most impactful thing, I guess, or the biggest thing that we felt. But everybody was on edge. We didn't know what was going on at that point, but I don't know. It just felt everybody was waiting for what comes next, I guess. So we were all just holding our breath. But yeah, it went back to day-to-day life, pretty quickly, besides the security checks and stuff like that. And nothing really changed. We didn't start training differently or doing things differently.
Yeah, and I guess initially, of course, the enemy was, the terrorist base in Afghanistan,
right.
And the whole way they went about going into Afghanistan involved relatively small and mostly elite forces.
Right.
So a large military unit, like First Cav, or the First Armored, which you were with later, I mean, those would not be the ones you would use there.
Right.
Anyway, okay. But now in 2002, you start to get ramping up the pressure to go and somehow go invade Iraq.
Right.
And at what point, I don't know, and then along in here someplace, you also go to Germany.
Yeah, in 2002, I went to Germany. I can't remember when in 2002, but I remember it was 2002. I went to Germany after I re-enlisted. So that was my So I re-enlisted and requested to go to Germany.
Okay.
While I was in Fort Hood. Yeah.
All right. And did your family go with you when you went to Germany?
No, because she was still in the military at that time. So and she was still on orders for the base. So no, she and the baby stayed in Texas, and I went to Germany. She was offered. Shortly after that, the opportunity to get out, and she took it. She was med boarded or whatever it's called. Yeah, so she got out, and then, so when she got out, then we got orders to go to Iraq. So she couldn't come to Germany anyway. So she flew. She was from California originally, so she flew back out to California. So I saw my wife and daughter for 18 days out of 2 years.
Wow.
Started that, yeah. So it was
okay. So what unit did you join in Germany?
It was 141 Signal Battalion, 1st Armored Division.
Okay. All right. And once you get to Germany, were they preparing to go somewhere, or did it take a while before that?
Yeah, they weren't. I mean, it was, again, the same, not again on post, you had all these rigorous inspections and stuff. We had like roving guard patrols that we did in the housing areas and stuff like that. But, I mean, really, other than that, it was training as usual. I mean, you can't replicate Iraq or Afghanistan in Germany, But, yeah, it was just normal training. They didn't, I mean, even when we knew we were going to go to Iraq, it really wasn't, we didn't train differently, prepared a little bit more. You pack different things, you try and prepare your equipment to deal with different things, but I mean, really, it was just training as usual.
Okay, and so at that point, and so nothing, preparing you for conditions you might have to deal with somewhere else,
right?
And just usual stuff. So I guess if you're going to do that, you do that after you got over there.
Yeah, which is what we did. Yeah.
Okay. So now, did you go to Middle East before the actual invasion of Iraq? I mean, before the American troops go into Iraq, were you already in Kuwait or Saudi Arabia? Or did you go over? Because where were you?
No, I was in Germany when the invasion started.
Okay.
But I want to say it was maybe 3 or 4 days after it started. I mean, we knew that we were going to leave. We didn't know when the invasion was going to start, but we knew when we had already been on orders to go to. So we knew we were being deployed, but yeah.
Okay. All right, and the invasion, I think it began probably around March of 2003, if I remember that.
Yeah,
right.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, and so you're kind of orders, and then...
Yeah, I want to say it was the first week of April we flew out to Kuwait. So yeah, so
Okay.
it was maybe we,
All right, and what's your first impression of Kuwait once you get there?
It's hot. I don't know. We had so much to do. I mean, you're moving equipment, and we flew forever, and to get on the plane, I mean, I had like 300 pounds of gear that I had to bring with me, and so you're just focusing on moving your feet from the one step to the next. I don't think I ever, I mean, it wasn't for a few days, stopped and to be like, oh wow, this is weird. It was just, you were just going through the motions.
And when you flew, did you fly in a military transport, or...?
It was a civilian jet, but it was all military on the flight. Well, besides the flight crew itself.
Right.
Yeah,
So you have like a chartered...
Yeah, it was like charter. Yeah.
Okay. So the 300 pounds of gear was under the plane.
Well, I mean, it was on your back at one point, but yeah.
While you were in the
Yeah, while I was on the plane, yes.
Not carry on.
Right. The only thing I carried on, I was assistant armor at the time, and so I had all of our rifle bolts in a lockbox. So, but other than that, yeah, that was the only thing I brought. And your M60, you bring it on the plane.
All right. Okay. So you arrive, you spend several days just kind of moving stuff around and getting organized. And then do you go to a camp in Kuwait?
Yes. Yeah. I don't remember the name of it, but yeah, we took took charter buses also, like it was very, very, very weird. Very long bus ride. All the curtains were closed, so we couldn't see, and no one could see in. We couldn't see out. It was, I don't know. I want to say it was like a 2-hour bus ride, and then we got to wherever we were, whatever camp it was, which was just essentially a bunch of tents just in the desert. But yeah, it was interesting.
Okay. Now, did the desert start to cause problems with your equipment or anything else between dust and?
Not initially. We didn't. It took a while for us to get our actual equipment. I mean, we cleaned our rifle, every day or multiple times a day. The biggest thing we had was, obviously with the dust, you would have to blow your nose constantly, and your lips got so chapped, like chapstick became like gold while you were over there. So it was real more the desert messing with us than our equipment at first.
Okay. And about how long did you stay in that camp?
I'm gonna say. So when was the mission accomplished? Was on the 9th of May?
That could be.
Something like that.
Okay.
And I want to say it was probably a week after that when we left. So I don't know. We didn't have cell phones at the time. I didn't have a calendar, or it was every day was just the next day. So.
Was your whole division there, or just your own unit? Or?
It was just in the camp. Well, the camp wasn't huge, but I remember our unit was there. We had maybe 6 or 7 huge tents, but there was like other units. We met people from like the Australian military and British, and there was a dining facility on the camp that we all, everybody obviously went there, and so you met people, but everybody kind of just stayed with your own unit. You didn't really talk to other people much, but.
All right. And so you can't watch CNN or something.
Right. Yeah. We didn't have TVs. We had a radio with AFN. That's how we heard the mission accomplished speech, but we didn't. Yeah. But that was, other than that. Yeah. We didn't have anything. It was no cell phones. No. No nothing. So.
All right. Our problem here.
We're not time. For power.
is that the battery thing is signaling it's very low.
Yeah.
So we're going to pause right here. Okay, so in your story, we've gotten you to the point where you've made it as far as Kuwait, and you're in a tent city in the desert someplace, waiting for something to happen.
Mm.
Okay, about how long did you spend at that camp?
A couple weeks, I think. Like I said, time moved differently, so it's hard to gauge the exact days, and I don't remember the exact dates. That's why I was using that. The President Bush's speech is more like markers in time. Yeah.
Okay. So then at what point do you find out you're moving? Or when you do find out you're moving now, what happens?
So we got told the night before that we were gonna move out, that we were gonna move to Baghdad. So it was just that day we checked over our trucks and made sure tire pressure was right. We had oil and coolant and things like that. Everybody had to make sure you had water and food, and so it was really just that, and then making sure that we got sleep, because that drive was a killer. It was a long drive when going into Iraq. So
okay, so take us through that day.
I remember getting up when it was dark. We got to the trucks, same thing, you go over, check everything. I remember we actually found one of our generators, one of the weld points had broken, and we identified it, and they were like, oh, okay, we'll see how it goes. And we made it probably 3 miles before it broke, and then they had to come swap out the generator, and it was a big deal. But it was really just prep, and then we had a platoon meeting or a company meeting, and they told us where we're going, and essentially you follow the truck in front of you. And that was it. And you just drove in what seemed to me blindly into the desert. There was no roads or anything. We just followed the guy in front of us and drove off.
So were you at least in the cab of the truck?
Oh, I was the driver. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. As an NCO, you don't usually aren't the driver, but I don't. I'm really weird about that. I always said if I was going to die in a vehicle, I was going to die behind the wheel. Okay. So, yeah, I drove all the time.
So what did you have in the back of the truck?
So in our truck, it was it's just like a regular Humvees, but it's modified, so it was like a pickup truck almost.
Okay.
And we had like a huge shelter, so on the back that had all of our signal equipment in it, and big enough that you could get in there and walk around, and I mean you could still touch the walls when you did that, but and then behind that we had a 10K generator that we pulled that powered everything.
Okay.
But yeah, all your, and then you throw your bags and personal gear and stuff like that in there. But yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
But you're really driving a modified Humvee rather
Yes.
than a Deuce and a half or something.
Yeah. It was just all of our trucks, and I mean we had a couple Deuce and a halves and stuff like that, but yeah, for the most part it was all Humvees, yeah, some form factor.
Okay. And so you're just driving. You're just how much spacing did you put between the trucks?
While we were driving to Iraq, they weren't as concerned about spacing or anything like that. So I mean, you were right up on the next person in line. But it's really that was probably the weirdest thing to, I guess, adjust to, was literally just, it felt like we were driving blindly through an open desert. Like, again, we didn't have GPS or anything like that. I mean, the people in the lead vehicles did, but yeah, it was just, it really, I don't know. It just felt like driving into the abyss.
So were you on a paved road, or was it just...
No, it was dirt. It was all sand. Yeah. Everything was sand, yeah. And then we drove, and then right before we got to Iraq, we finally hit a road, a paved road, and then we drove that for a while, and then you just get to like these guard posts, and there's like these giant sand berms that they had built, like 20 feet high, and it looked like a bulldozer had just plowed a space for you to drive through in the middle. And then once you drove through, it was a sea of people, just women and children, just lined the road for miles and miles and miles. And they would run or walk randomly just in front of your vehicles, trying to get hit. And we were told, try not to hit people, but don't stop. And so you're just going on this road. It's just a slalom of people, and I mean, women are just holding babies that have had no food or water, and it's just, that's probably the most devastating thing that maybe not the most devastating, but it's definitely the one that keeps it coming back to me. Just once you cross through that berm and you just saw that sea of people, it was quite a shock. I mean, you realized you were somewhere different.
So were there houses and buildings around along the road, or just a road and these people were there?
It seemed absolutely insane, because these paved roads go and you look to your left or right and it's just dirt for as far as you can see. I don't know where these people were staying. I don't know where their house. I mean, for miles and miles and miles in every direction. No houses, no nothing. It's just empty desert. It was.
Okay. And as you moved away from the border, did the people eventually mostly disappear?
Yeah. So it was right there. I mean, that was where the bulk was all concentrated. So it probably took us maybe 10 or 15 minutes to get it was probably only a mile where the people were lined up. But I mean, again, trying not to run over people who were just darting in front of vehicles. And but yeah, once you cleared that, then it was just, it looked like highway here. It was just, it was night. Well, probably better than the highways here because they don't get snow.
All right. And was there anything to see? I mean, did you go through towns or things like that? Or
no. It was like it really felt like being on like an expressway, but there was no other cars. There was nothing. It was like a ghost town or a movie, apocalypse movie, and
the landscape itself, was it green, brown?
It was all brown. But it was. I mean, it's gorgeous. We saw like herds of camel running. I never seen one outside of a zoo, and it's just it was wild. It was an alien landscape. That's the closest thing I come. I've never seen anything like it. I never experienced anything like it. I mean, it's a beautiful country, but it was just very surreal to be in there. In that, like I said, it felt post-apocalyptic.
Okay. Now, did you just drive straight through to the Baghdad area, or did you stop someplace?
We stopped, and I can't remember where, and I don't remember how. I know it was a long time. I remember driving from that morning, and then by the time we stopped, it was dark again. So we drove all the way through the whole day, and then they had like these little fobs or camps set up that specifically catered to the convoys coming in. And we stayed one night there and got hot food and water, and then continued on the next day to Baghdad. And then that day we got to Baghdad. So.
Okay. And were there refueling stations along the way?
We had 5-gallon fuel cans
Okay.
that we carried, so everybody had 4 with them. But yeah, I mean, I remember stopping maybe twice in the convoy to put a couple fuel cans in.
Okay.
And then we filled up at that fob as
Right.
well. But yeah, so I mean, logistically, it had to be planned out. I mean, sure they had something going, but we were just told to carry 4 fuel cans, so that was
Okay. Now, as you get, were you in a base outside of Baghdad, or where did you go?
Well, we were on at the airport,
Okay,
at
airport.
Baghdad International
Okay.
Airport. Yeah.
All
Well, I
right.
guess it was. Well, now it's Baghdad International. I think it was Saddam Hussein International Airport at the time when we rolled in, but.
Okay. And what was the setup there like?
It was. I mean, more the same. Again, it felt like a movie. It was just. So we get in that day. It's dark again. On the road in, there was a sniper in one of the buildings that was just. I don't even know if it was a sniper. But they were taking shots at our convoy, and we had at that point military police with us, and so they took care of that for us. But that was really the only like resistance, and it was super light. Once we get to Baghdad, I mean, it's a gigantic airport, so we pulled up. It's dark again. I've never seen it, so it's hard to recall everything. But I remember staging all our trucks, and we just slept in the trucks that night, so that we had guard duty and stuff. But the airport itself was secure by that point. We had guards, and so worst we had to worry about was mortars or rockets, getting shot over the wall. But that first night, we just slept in the trucks, and then the next morning, then we set up and talked with Third ID, who we were leaving, and we kind of
3rd Infantry Division.
Third Infantry Division. Yeah, we kind of exchanged stories. I actually a guy that I went or I was stationed in Korea with was in Third ID, and I actually met up with him there. So that was weird. I hadn't seen him since Korea. Oh my god, what a weird place to meet. And then we set up all our equipment and our shots, and then for probably a couple days, we had to work on building the communication network and making sure that all of the sites were secure. And then from there, we had like our remote communications teams that went out to different places. My section just stayed at the airport there.
Okay.
I mean, like right on the tarmac for the whole deployment. So
how long was the deployment?
it was only supposed to be 12 months, but we wound up getting extended. We had packed everything up, and like we were lined up ready to go in, and they were like, shut it down, put everything back up. So it wound up being 15 months total.
All right. So did you have a daily routine there?
I mean, you had to kind of establish it, because like we didn't have bathrooms. There was no barracks. There was no. I slept on the roof of my truck for 6 months. I mean, yeah, we didn't have anything. I didn't know you were actually talking about it. The burn pits for the latrines. Yeah, I got to experience that where you.
So even
pour
if
diesel
you're at an airport, presumably there are like buildings and things.
For sure.
And normally the U.S. military is pretty good about making itself at home. So after 6 months of sleeping on top of your truck, did you eventually get a better place to sleep?
Yes. we stayed in one of the, I don't know if it was a maintenance hangar or something like that. There was a giant, probably bigger than this room, hole in the middle of it where they had dropped something through the roof. But they had like offices that we converted into bedrooms, and then, you had 2 people to a room. It wound up being eventually pretty comfortable as far as some of the living standards I've lived in.
All right. Was it air conditioned?
We had a couple air conditioners. The first one we had, we were on a convoy and we just found it in a hole. It was just an air conditioner abandoned. Okay. And so we got that. But no, I mean, for the most part, we did not have. I mean, our vehicle Humvees are not air conditioned, and no, none of the barracks rooms were air conditioned at first. Again, I've heard stories now that they're much nicer.
All right. So how are you actually, when you're on duty, what are you actually doing while you're there on the base?
It's the hurry up and wait. Like, we're not actually, like, in that first 6 months, like, we didn't have, like, a PT routine or anything like that. You set up, like, shifts that you run and really just sit in your shelter and wait to see if a shot goes out or the signal drops, or we had our node center was like the brain that controlled all of the network. They would say, oh, you gotta adjust this or adjust that, but really once you got everything in, at first it was a lot of sitting around just waiting. We dug like a bunker because they would drop mortars on us all the time. Things like that. People were looking for places to stay. There were some people who were sleeping, in buildings and stuff like that while I was still sleeping on my truck. But yeah, it was just, I don't know, you kind of just develop a routine, but we're a little bit left to our own devices. It felt like our individual units had whatever orders that they were, and then they told us, and we just did our little piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. Well, what did your little piece seem to be? Are you
telephones?
Just facilitating communications between units in the field and on the base, or?
Yeah. So the node center builds like the actual, like, essentially the internet network, and then our shots or our communication shots are what kind of builds it up. But yeah, it just builds that spider web network out. But yeah, we were the only place on the airport, at least I think at the time, that had the ability to call back to the States.
Okay.
And so we would get like the MPs and stuff like that would come up, and it became like a little side enterprise where people would like bring you movies or soda or something, and you'd let them use the phone. And I mean, you didn't have to bring anything. We would obviously let you use them, but they didn't have anything set up. There was no call centers to call home. There was no internet cafes to use email. There was no, so we were like the only way to communicate with families back home, and so we were pretty popular.
Okay. And to what extent were you aware of what was going on in Iraq, or what your unit was actually doing?
Like, we did daily convoys because we had those remote sites. We had to bring mail. Initially, we had to bring, make sure that they had food and water and stuff like that. So we went out into the area quite regularly. So we saw, what was going on. My unit specifically, myself, we didn't hit IDs. We never ran into ambushes. We never got into protracted firefights or anything like it. It was pretty standard. We just drove from here to there. It seemed pretty normal. We were aware of everything. You had briefings. They were hiding IEDs and dead dogs and stuff like that. Anything trash. We had constant briefings about not engaging with the environment, pretty much, because anything could be a bomb.
Right. So we are back with Jason Hall after a certain technical glitch interrupted our shooter earlier. We had gotten you as far as Iraq in the middle of 2003. We had been talking about basically doing road convoys or going out to resupply the different elements of your unit out in the field. And you mentioned that pretty much anything along the side of the road could have an improvised explosive device or IED in it.
Right.
So that was interesting. Okay. Now when you were going out on these patrols, were you driving still? Was that
yes. And they weren't really. We didn't go out on patrols. It was always it was just to go and visit those other out sites that we had. But yeah.
So
we weren't specifically like looking for anything. It was more of a.
Okay. Yeah. And how far did you have to drive to do those?
I don't know the distance. I never had the GPS. I was never
Okay.
in the lead vehicle, but and it's weird because you're navigating again these roads and these huge trucks with these huge convoys, and there's people living their lives in the area. So I mean, just to go down the street sometimes could take an hour because you had to deal with try and navigate crowds and stuff like that. So, but I don't know, average probably hour and a half drive to the
Okay.
to the outsites that we
Yeah,
visited.
yeah, all right. So, but you are going through populated areas.
Yes.
And you're doing this, because you're based at the airport outside of Baghdad. So
Yes.
there's going to be still people and stuff
Right.
around there. Okay. And so did you ever get shot at yourself or your vehicle?
No convoy that I was in, I was lucky. We never hit an ID. We never got shot at. We never had an ambush. I mean, it's a tense situation, and you're always very aware. But I got very, very lucky. We never had an issue. So
Okay. Did other parts of your unit have those issues?
they did. I mean, there was convoys that rolled into ambushes. I don't think, at least I don't recall anyone in my unit like being attacked by that or hitting an ID or anything like that. And I know we had no loss of life and no combat related casualties. I mean, we had people who had like heat stroke, and people did not couldn't handle like the mental pressures of it, and some people had to get sent back. But really, when we left, like I said, we got very lucky.
Okay.
Very, very lucky.
All right. And did you have any sense of what else was going on in Iraq at that time?
No, I mean, not really. We were really just focused on day to day. You just accomplish the next mission, and then you get the next one, and then you accomplish that mission, and then you just keep moving. I don't.
Okay. Now, you did mention, I think, that when you were in your base camp, there would be times when you'd get mortars shot at you. Or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
So describe what that was like.
Yeah, and it wasn't like daily, but I mean, several times a week we would get. And again, we never saw them because we're in the airport, and so there's obviously security on the ring. But what we were told is that the insurgents and things like that would weld like mortar tubes to the back of a pickup truck, and so they were just driving around the outside, and they would just dump a mortar in, and they didn't have targets or anything. They were just trying to irritate us, I guess. But I guess like anything else, it just becomes part of your day. You start recognizing what incoming and outgoing sounds like, and you hear it better from further away. And so you're like, oh, let's get to the bunker. And but there was occasions, I mean, more than one occasion where you just be sitting there and not hear anything, and then all of a sudden things would start exploding, and it's very hectic, and you make a mad dash. But again, we got super, super lucky. My unit was very, very, very fortunate. I mean, that was like the bulk of the hostilities that we faced was things like that.
Okay. How would you characterize the morale in your unit?
I mean, it was good at first. I mean, none of us were like excited to go do it, but we all, everybody's dedicated to each other. You're there to support your people, and so the bigger mission maybe takes a back seat, and it just becomes you're focused on keeping the people that you're with, leaving for them. But it drags on, and that oppressive heat and just that the grim specter of death that hangs over you. And anything could happen at any moment, and so.
Does that have
There was
a cumulative effect?
Yeah, and so, I mean, I think for the most part, the whole time we were there, even when we wound up getting extended, I mean, there was some pushback and people were very pissed. But everybody really maintained, for the most part, their professionalism, and we all recognized it was a shit situation that we just all were in, and we all had to deal with it, and being mad about it wasn't going to solve the thing. So,
How did you deal with the heat?
I mean, eventually we had air conditioning and things like that. So we had like our CPs would have air conditioning, and then the rooms that we had in the building that we were staying in eventually had air conditioning. Our shelters have a fan that you can turn on that gives you a little bit. So when it's really hot, you would just lock yourself in and you open up the vent and you turn it on, and it's not any less hot, but at least you have some kind of air movement. But really, other than that, you just hope you get used to it. I used to say it's like somebody just tapping on your forehead. It was just that, it's always there, always annoying, and it's just something I learned to deal with. So,
Did they give you salt tablets or other stuff like that? Was there anything else you were supposed to do to just keep from sweating out, or you just went about your business?
Yeah, I mean, they really made sure that you, they wanted you to drink water. So that was a constant part, and especially as NCOs, to make sure that your soldiers were getting water. But we had an issue in our unit. They weren't giving us water. So we actually, me and a couple other people, they had like a big field that had all the units who were on buyout. They had all their connexes there, and we had to break in and steal water. So it was.
So you're in a smaller unit on the lower end of the supply chain?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Well, what had really sparked it was we had those big water buffaloes, and that's where we had primarily been in. But then, like 2 weeks into using those, they found out they were just coated in rust, so we were just drinking rust water, and so we couldn't. And so then they had to readjust how we got our water, and so there was a gap there when we had to do some. I mean, we didn't do like nefarious. I'm not cutting locks and doing missions in the dark or anything like that. But I mean, you got to get water. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, are there particular events or things that stand out in your memory, or just particular memories that stand out for you from that time in Iraq?
Oh, for sure. The DHL plane that got shot. I don't remember. I think it was 2003. A DHL plane going into the airport got hit by a rocket, I think, or something. It hit, and we actually watched it come in. The building that we was our temporary barracks, or what it was, probably 300 yards from the actual tarmac of the airfield. So like we were all waiting and watching for this plane to crash, and the pilots actually did amazing, and they landed, and there was no fatalities or anything like that. And but we didn't. They shut off our mail for like a month, so we didn't get any mail. So that was about the most irritating. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I remember they had Robin Williams did a USO show there. I remember that was very big. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of events, but it's. I mean, how many times can you recount being terrified because a rocket blew up near you or something like? So it's a lot of those, but.
So you got rocketed as well as mortared?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. They use the term interchangeably. I'm not I don't know what they were. I just know something about.
I mean, they were in Vietnam. You had a lot of both.
Yeah.
And the Soviets made large numbers of 122mm rockets.
Right.
But if they were used in the same way, you point them in the general direction of your target.
Right. And we were told, and that's maybe why we started using rockets, mortars, interchange, because we didn't know which one. But yeah, we were told the same thing, that they were shooting 120mm rockets at us, or 122. Yeah. But yeah, again, we don't know. It's just an explosion to us. I don't know what the ordnance was that they were shooting at us. It could have been bowling balls for all I know. Yeah, I don't know. There's lots of stuff that I think about from there. I try to focus more on the good stuff, because it wasn't all bad times. We had good times, It's a large group of people, and you're living with every single day, and you become really close with those people. And I mean, it's a year and 15 months of your life you're sharing with a person.
Yeah. So what would you do when you're off duty?
I mean, you either go back to your room. We had so there was a very large like black market like bootleg movie thing. So they would, at the time it was VCD was the format that they were using, and so so you would trade movies essentially with like people who would come in, and it became like this weird economy of movies. So that was very big. Like, I mean, we didn't have access to, there was no TV or anything like that.
What would you play the movie in?
Oh, people had laptops or yeah, stuff like that. And I mean, eventually, as we progressed and things started building up, I mean, people had PlayStations and Xboxes and TVs and all that stuff, and it did start to become, you know, that the first 6 months were sleeping on the tarmac and stuff like that. You know, it did eventually fade away, but.
I mean, and they, you know, bring fast food franchises into the airport.
Yes, Burger King came in, and it was crazy. The first day that Burger King, and like all they sold was like 4 items on it, but it was like a 12-hour wait to get into this Burger King. Like the line was that long. You just had to sit and wait, and we ran like rotational shifts to wait in line for the unit. But yeah, it was really. I had heard at one point that Burger King was the busiest Burger King in the world. Yeah, because I mean, when it went in, like it was the only one, and so it was like a beacon, you know, and people from outsites and stuff would come in, and you get the Marines, and you get other countries, you know, the Allied countries would come in, and everybody wanted to go to Burger King. So it was yeah. But that was the only like fast food I think that we had. It was just that one little Burger King. So, but it was nice.
And did you have much contact with the Iraqis?
We had people that would work with us kind of on a daily basis for the unit. We would, you know, they were hired to do jobs or whatever, you know, whatever, clean up or something like that, and you would have to escort them. And you get to talk a little bit, but I mean, it's a. They didn't teach us Arabic, right? And you know, to their credit, the Iraqis knew much more English than we knew Arabic. So, we try to communicate as best you can, but it wasn't tons of contacts. I mean, again, I was lower level. We had a guy. He set up a business and was selling freezers. An Iraqi guy. And we get to talk to him a little bit and kind of. I just remember he used to chain smoke. Like while we're talking, he probably smoked 2 packs of cigarettes like in a row, and he kind of just told us about life in Iraq, I guess, and you know, I don't know. It gives you a little bit of different perspective. But yeah, there was not a ton of interaction. Like I said, we were. It was more trying to avoid than really interacting at that point, at least, you know.
And you're there for 12 months, and then you're informed that you're being extended.
Right.
All right. And did they give you a rationale for that?
They just said that they weren't ready to do the hand. I forget who was supposed to relieve First Armor, but they just said that they weren't ready to do the handoff because that unit had come in country. I mean, a couple months before that 12-month deadline. So like we had broken down our site, we had packed up our trucks, our rooms were empty, we were all staged and ready to go. We're just waiting at the CP for the word, and they're like, put it back up. So it was, you know.
And did you have the same leadership the whole way through? Same officers?
No. Well, for the most part, I think we had our lieutenant changed in the middle, like our platoon leader. Mm-hmm. Yeah, changed in the middle, and our first sergeant got really sick in the beginning. And we had just had an acting first sergeant, but other than that, yeah, really it was the same. You were there for the whole time with the same people.
Mm-hmm. All right, and then when you eventually do get relieved, what's the process for that? I mean, you said you were all packed up. Did you do anything to orient the next unit before you left?
We didn't. We didn't really even talk to them. Yeah, they when we came in, we occupied the same sites that Third ID had. They took down their stuff and we put our stuff up in the same place. But I guess at that point, maybe the mission parameters or something had changed, and so they needed to lay out the network differently. So really, we didn't have I mean, again, me personally, I didn't really even talk to the other units, so there was really no sharing of information between at least at my level with the unit that was really good. So.
Okay. And to think back across that 15 months you spent in Iraq, are there other events or things that kind of stand out for you or experiences that you haven't put into the story yet?
I mean, there's 10 million, but I learned. I was actually talking with my wife, and I really think I spent like the last 20 years just trying everything I could to keep those things down, so I don't think about them.
Okay.
and so I had like set up. I mean, it's inevitable. People are going to ask you about things, and so you have the prepackaged, acceptable experiences that you can relay to people. There's lots of stuff. It's weird what people get used to when you're forced to. I mean, it's nothing that I really care to go super deep in depth on. Like I'm not trying to be
No, that's entirely that kind of thing is entirely up to you. Where you go.
I really like to focus more on the better things. You know, the weird USO shows, the Bob Hope dining facility. You know, that was a big deal when they built that. 'Cause, we just been eating MREs or they had what are they called? They're still rations, but it's a hot breakfast, or I forget what they're called, but yeah, you'd get eggs and stuff like that. But when they put a dining facility in, like wow, it's like supposed to be state of the art. It looked like a dome kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Good things.
So they built a dining facility. Did they build any entertainment facilities or a gym or anything like that?
They did have a gym. I mean, there was no. Eventually, they put in like an internet cafe, and they had this big truck that had like all these phones in it, so you could go in and call home. But no, not. I mean, that was pretty much. Again, it's 2003. It's a lot different looking at it now. You know what I mean?
It's still early.
Yeah.
As far as that's
Yeah.
concerned. I mean, how much communication did you have with people at home while you were out there?
We had more than most because we had the phone. But it was super hard to get through. And so, I mean, it could take 2 or 3 hours to get through. Like you would just dial and 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 dial. And it was, it would take sometimes hours to get through. And I don't know that I ever received a good justification for why that was. But I mean, again, we just get used to things. But we didn't, and once they, toward the end of the thing when we had, they put the internet cafe and stuff like that, and we were able to email. So then it was a little bit better, but it was mostly mail, like letters and packages and stuff like that. So that was the bulk of our communication.
Okay. Yeah, and then you never got a leave to go home or anything during that 15 months.
I did. We got 2 weeks. Yeah, everybody got. And we had an R&R. I didn't go. I gave mine to another guy, but we got to go to Qatar for R&R for like 3 days. I think they did. Yeah. But yeah, other than that, it was great. But yeah.
So how far into your tour did you go home?
I was like 9 or 10 months in, when I finally went home. It was, and then my son was born, so I missed his birth, but I was able to see him about 2 weeks after he was born. So, but then I didn't see him again for a while.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know. I mean, how long does it take to get from the Baghdad airport back home?
I couldn't give you an accurate hour. It seemed like, 600 years. It's a very long process because you go from the airport in Baghdad, you take a C-130 to Kuwait, and then in Kuwait they have like a de facto base that had like all your S1, S2, stuff like that.
All your uniforms.
Yeah, and they had, so you could buy plane tickets and stuff like that. They had it all set up, and then you get a plane ticket, and then the flight is for like the next day, and so you stay in Kuwait in a tent, and it's such a long process. And then the flight itself, you have to go. I think we went from Kuwait to Malta to Germany, and then from Germany I went to Atlanta, and then my wife was in California at the time, and then all the way to California, and it's kind of different because you with all military at first, and then it dwindles, and so by the time I was on that last flight, I'm still in uniform. It was just me though, with a bunch of civilians, which was the first time I've ever felt like a rock star. When I was walking through airports and stuff, when you're in uniform, especially at that time. Yeah, I mean, people were running up to me and like hugging me, and it was quite surreal experience. But again, I think just adds to I have no idea how long it took me to get home. It was a long time.
How long did you get to spend at home?
I think it was 12 days, and then I had to go back. So yeah, it was.
All right.
But
okay.
I'd have taken 12 hours at that point. I mean, I hadn't seen a flushing toilet in 10 months, so it was different.
Right. Okay. So now we get you to the end of your 15 months. Where do you go from Iraq?
I went back to Germany, to Wiesbaden. That's where our unit was stationed. And
all right. And then how long did you spend there?
Well, that was it. That was the end of my. I actually ETS'd from Germany and separated and got out of the military. But it was like a year. So we got back in 2004 in July, and I left in August of 2005.
Okay. So anything notable happened during that year in Germany?
They tried to stop-loss me and deploy me back to Iraq again. My unit wound up going back to Iraq. It was a protracted battle with JAG because I'm bored with the details, but we wound up obviously getting out. And
yeah. Now you had re-enlisted. Now, when you enlisted in 1998, was that a 4-year enlistment?
Yes.
Okay. Then you re-enlisted in 2002.
Right.
Now, was that just a 3-year?
No, it was a 4-year also, but the way that they run, so you're eligible to re-enlist at 3 years.
Yeah.
And if you re-enlist then that's when your tour of duty starts for your next 4.
Okay.
So they takes out that final 4th year of your. That's why I was only 7.
Okay. So you had re-enlisted actually in 2001, or
yeah, in
so after 9/11?
No, before.
Just before.
In August. yeah. In August, I think I re-enlisted.
Okay. All right. So basically, what had motivated you to re-enlist in the first place?
I really liked it. I enjoyed it. I mean, again, prior to 9/11, it was just a job, but it was an interesting job. I never would have gotten to Korea. I thought I would have been in Texas, and then you meet people, and I met my wife and started a family, and it just seemed like I really enjoyed it, and then
And then you got all this.
things change, circumstances change. Yep.
Okay, and obviously they didn't want you to leave just yet if they were trying to stop you
Yeah.
to stay.
I made a lot of people very angry. They were very mad at me that I wanted to leave. So I did not make any friends in that process. So, but yeah.
All right. So then you go out, you get back, and what do you do once you get back?
Once I get back to the States,
yeah,
like after the military.
After you discharge, yeah.
I came to Michigan, and okay, struggle. I don't know. It's an adjustment, but I wound up getting a job with Home Depot, and I worked with them for about 6 years, and then I started working with the police and emergency services, installing their radios and stuff like that. So it did translate, and their lighting systems and stuff like that. And I did IT for a while. I did lots. I never found my niche, I guess. I just did a lot of stuff, and then decided to become a teacher.
Okay. Now, you can say as much or little about this as you want to. What was it like readjusting to civilian life, or what basic challenges are there for somebody in your position trying to go back to being a civilian after that?
I think maybe like mindset. I'm trying not to be. I'm not trying to be divisive or negative. you just think a different way after living that way and within that organization and the strict regimentation of everything and it's to just be left to your own devices with people who don't share similar values or goals it's really weird and you get really angry because I think for me at least it exposed my time in the military and specifically in Iraq exposed me to some things that made me really question like the foundation that I had built my entire belief system on. And then I just, it's dealing with people is always the worst one, but I don't know. It is an adjustment and I fell victim and I could not do well and I fell into drug abuse, I fell into alcohol abuse, I was luckily never arrested or incarcerated or anything like that, but I got divorced. It was a lot of stuff. You just deal with it. I don't know. It's
all right. And then did you get help from the VA or anybody else?
Yeah, it took a while. My mother had to like drag me into the VA because I was gonna kill myself, and it was but I've been with the VA since 2008 now, and they're a great organization doing everything they can. Yes, I've benefited greatly from them. There's we've done a lot of things that help me process and adjust. And I mean, it'll always be a battle, but it's that weird transition.
Well, no, and that's something that I see a lot of. I talk to people who've been there. It really doesn't matter that much if you're in an actual war. It doesn't matter which one it was,
right?
And especially if you're in high tension situations for a long period of time, as you were. Right. It's just what that does to your mind, even if they're not shooting at you.
Right.
It is pretty profound, and then the difference between that military world and the civilian one, it is pretty striking as well. And some people find a way out of it by catching help, and some of them don't.
Yeah, I have lost more friends after than I did. I mean, during it's a plague. People are killing themselves, and it's not good.
And there are various issues there with misdiagnosis of PTSD and giving them depressant drugs when that's the opposite of what they should do, and a lot of other stuff. So it is kind of a mess. So certainly glad that you worked through it here as far as you have. Now, what motivated you to want to become a teacher?
My kids. So just seeing, I have my oldest is 23 and my youngest is 9. Mm-hmm. So I've just seen the way, I guess. So I chose to focus on history specifically because I think people and kids today are not being taught how to find information. They're being told information, but they have no skills developed or backed up for them to verify that information. So I think that the way to combat this misinformation and fake news and all that stuff is to give kids the tools to be able to discern what is real and what is fake. And I thought that the best way I could do that was to be a teacher. And maybe it's a lofty goal, but I don't know.
It's part of what we all try to do.
Right.
So you're doing secondary education?
Yeah. And I don't from 6th to 12th, I don't. Not that I'm like, early childhood education is super important, but I think it's the 6 to 12 when you can really help them develop. At that, you're not focused on the base. They know the basics already. So
that's really when a lot of the critical thinking skills develop.
Yeah.
And so forth. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now, are you going into teacher assisting and student teaching next year?
Yeah, I actually have my placement interview on Friday, this coming up Friday. So yeah.
All right. Well, and then I guess. In a way, we were kind of talking about this, and one of those kind of standard questions I'll ask is you kind of look back over your time in the service. What do you think you took out of it, and how did it affect you in this case, particularly maybe positively? What were the good things that you took out of it?
So I always loved I think it was Mark Twain. He said that travel is the death of prejudice, and I think that's what I took out of it the most. I was exposed to, from a kid in homogeneously white, Ionia, Michigan, to all the places that I've been and all the people that I've seen and all the people that I've worked with have just opened me up to a unimaginable wealth of different experiences and opinions and thoughts, and it I think really helped open my mind and be receptive to what other people go through in their lives, and that people are people. In the end, we really have a lot more similarities than we do differences, and we're all working for the same goal. And I think that's probably the most positive thing that I think I can take from the military, is that I feel like I'm more wide open to what other people are going through, more empathetic.
That's a particularly valuable thing to pick up in a whole lot of ways. And I think people who watch this, especially some who've experienced some of what you have or really are not familiar with it, they can watch this and go, oh, okay. Yeah, that may open their eyes a little bit too.
Right.
So thank you very much for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you.
Today.